What's up, guys? It's the essential John L. Crossfire.
And I am Nova Lee.
And you guys are tuned into Caught
In Conversation.
Shaka Laka Laka. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to episode 131 of Caught in Conversation. Hope, the only thing stronger than fear. Kudos to those of you that get the reference. It's probably not it's not like a super obscure reference, but it's a fairly little nerdy reference that I personally hold very dear, that I actually want to get tattooed on me at some point. So that's kind of funny, but it was the first thing that popped into my head when I was thinking of the Hope from the Top Rope, Luke Watts, who we're talking to today. But as always, I am the essential John L. Crossfire.
And I am Nova Lee.
And this was an awesome, very fun conversation. We say that damn near every episode, every week, and twice a week for the month of October because they're all double headers. But I swear these just get better and better, honestly. Like, it's almost like every other week now where we'll do an episode where it's like, that was our favorite episode. And then we have another conversation and it's just, this is really awesome. I really, really enjoy this. And I feel like this episode was just under an hour all up before we put this intro and outro on, and we got so much out of this conversation.
Just going back to what you said before, dare I say, I just like getting caught in the conversations.
Absolutely. That was the whole point of whole point of me, obviously it's a pun on caught in the crossfire. So it was like, I couldn't just go caught in the crossfire for the, thing. It was just like, caught in the conversation, caught in conversation. Here we are, 131 episodes in, semi-explaining the name. Like, I think it's been explained here and there, but that was the whole point was, like, obviously, for a long time I did solo episodes, and it wasn't until episode 21 I had my mate G-Mac, and that wasn't even a wrestling episode. It was just, we talked a bit about wrestling. It was just us talking about Yu-Gi-Oh! And cosplaying and everything in between. But fast forward to now, and what we're talking about here with Luke could be, without a doubt, it's easily the biggest wrestling event to happen in Canberra, but it's going to shape up to be one of the biggest events in Australian wrestling history. And the fact that it's all homegrown talent is ridiculous to me.
Yeah,
and
phenomenal.
And as I said to Luke in the conversation that you're about to hear, and it wasn't blowing smoke because I've said it to you, Nova, and I've said it to other people in the business, where I truly believe that once we get to November 2nd, and obviously if you're listening to this on the day it drops, it's 1 week and 6 days, so not quite 2 weeks. But I honestly think in that 2 weeks, and as we get closer, I think they're going to come pretty damn close to doubling that figure that NXT got, which is it's awesome to see. It's awesome to hear. And I said to Luke we had 4 tickets. I forgot that my other brother was coming with his partner, so my apologies. We have 6 tickets to this event, and I couldn't be more excited. Like, obviously, as I said to Luke, we're going to be kind of up in the balcony a little bit, but I have to be out of the way for health reasons with the stitches in my eye and everything else. But no, I cannot wait. This whole show, top to bottom, is stacked, and I genuinely can't tell on paper which is going to be the best match, because obviously, Luke, he's tentative at the moment, but that main event being a cage match is a big deal. But the Terry Campese Battle Royal is a big deal. The tag titles, the King's Court won them and then were stripped because they attacked the ref, and now we're going to, guarantee champion with the Untouchables versus the Dropouts. I am very excited for the Untouchables to be a part of this show. Coming all the way over from Perth is a huge deal. Obviously, someone we had on the show a couple of weeks ago and was just on, well, actually, as we record this intro and outro today, is the same day we did the episode, on October 13th, Tommy Knight, who's going to be on this show, facing Mikey Broderick, which is another match that's going to be huge. He was just in PWA Coliseum. But yeah, there is so much on this card, and if you were to put a gun to my head and say, pick a match, I'm just going to close my eyes and point. And whatever it lands on, it lands on. Like, there's so much stuff on this card, and as always, I keep saying it, I'm a cracked record, but thank you to Luke, thank you to everyone we've had on. And no, Luke dropped some bombs, some bombshell advice in this, and I honestly 100% of it I agreed with, and I'm just glad, because it's one of those things where, like, I try my best to not put myself over on this show, because it's like, yeah, I'm the host, but it's not about me, it's about the people we're talking to, Nova. And like, I say all these things to the rookies and the young people coming in, I'm like, but because I'm just a guy, and like, in my mind, I'd like to think I have a great IQ for wrestling. I truly do. And I know that makes me sound vain or whatever, but like, I have a brain for this. I know I have a brain for this. And it pisses me off when people don't listen. So having someone like Luke, who's been around for 20 years and had 2,000 plus matches up and down the country and overseas in other countries, basically say the same things with even more passion than I've been saying them, really, really refreshing to hear. And I hope that young wrestlers listen to, and not even the young wrestlers, the people that have been in this business for, 15 years and think they just coast by. I hope that what Luke says lights a fire under their ass, whether in Australia or otherwise, because again, he drops some absolute bombs here. But I'm ranting, Nova. If you'd like to hit the song and match of the week, we'll explain why we've picked those, and then you can introduce our guest, and as always, we'll then time travel to the outro where we'll do all the plugs properly for this Slam show and other stuff, and the Patreon, and yada, 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 blah, blah, blah. Hit the song and match of the week, please, my lovely wife.
Alrighty. So, the song of the week for episode 131 was Another Level by O The Larceny, and the match for the week for episode 131 was Sting versus Ric Flair, Clash of the Champions, 1988.
And why did you pick this song, Nova?
I picked this song because, like you've just discussed before, Slam has become on another level. So, that being said, because when we went into it as well, that they might even double ticket sales compared to NXT.
Yeah, which is, okay, yeah, so it's not a main brand, but at the time we had Shinsuke Nakamura, Samoa Joe, Bobby Roode, Eric Young was on that cut, like so many well-known established wrestlers that hardcore wrestling fans, and this is ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous,
and that's why I thought that song was very fitting.
Well, look, and we just kind of skimmed over it before with, Tommy Knight versus Mikey Broderick, Tommy Knight just in PWA Coliseum. I know that, there's a debate of which wrestling scene's better. I think as a whole, Victoria hands it down. But if we were to pick just one company that's the best company, I've been saying for a few years now that I think PWA is at that top. But honestly, they're 3 years in now, so it's probably too early to say. But Slam are well and truly in that conversation, and if they keep this momentum going, Slam could overtake as the number one wrestling company in the country. And again, they've had Robbie Eagles a couple of times who works New Japan and stuff like that, but at the end of the day, it's still all homegrown talent.
Yeah.
Like this, they haven't, and look, maybe they'll eventually fly an international in, maybe they won't, but the level that Slam is on in such a short amount of time, and the connections they've made and the product they've put out is just amazing. It really is. And
definitely,
if, for whatever reason, people in the business aren't happy that they're succeeding, they need to take a look at themselves and really ask themselves why.
You know what I'm happy for? Just wrestling in Australia succeeding. That's all I can do.
How good is professional wrestling? And again, we'll quickly skim through this so you can do the announcement and stuff. Obviously, the reason I picked this match was there was a match that Luke said specifically on Nitro. I think he said it was about 96 between Sting and Ric Flair. But there was not a bad Sting and Ric Flair match, arguably ever, honestly, in my opinion. And this match here, this is actually my favourite Sting match of all time.
Okay.
So I just had to throw it out there. It's a great, spoiler alert if you haven't seen it, but it's from the 1980s, 1988. We've got Ric Flair's manager, J.J. Dillon, hanging above the ring in a shark cage, similar to how Dominic Mysterio just was for WWE fans in recent times. And it goes to a 45-minute draw. Flair, tries the tricks, da-da-da-da. Sting gets him in the Scorpion Deathlock, and just as Ric Flair's finally going to submit, 45 minutes elapses. That was the time limit for that match. The match ends. Commentators argue whether they should get 5 more minutes. You can debate, was he going to tap, wasn't he going to tap, should Sting be the champion right now? It's what Luke talks about in this conversation towards the end when we ask him, one of the staple ones of dream opponents and dream stipulations, and he says he just enjoys classic wrestling. And it was just a classic good guy, bad guy. The good guy came so close to winning. The bad guy was literally about to tap out. And the bell rang. The time limit expired. And I'm getting goosebumps talking about this match because the matches that... And Flair and Steamboat did it as well, but Flair and Sting go watch any Flair Sting match. But if you're going to watch just one and you've got a spare hour to kill, this is a 45-minute match. I think it's probably close to an hour with, entrances and everything. But freaking chef's kiss, just awesome match, which is why I picked that match. But as we're talking about with Luke here, like we love wrestling. We want wrestling to succeed, and it's just classic wrestling at its core is just fucking awesome. Wrestling for everyone. But yeah, I'm going to throw it to you, Nova, so we can do the introduction and these guys can get to this conversation because, as I said, the conversation with Luke was just under an hour, so I don't want to rant too long because we've got to time travel to the outro and jump all the plugs and the Patreon and the actual show itself and whatever. So I'm going to press this button and you know what to do.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome from our nation's capital, the current Slam Pro Wrestling League champion, the Hope from the Top Rope, Luke Watts!
Ladies and gentlemen, we are here with the Hope from the Top Rope, current Slam Pro Wrestling League heavyweight champion, Luke Watts. I'm very excited to have you here, Luke. I haven't spoken to you properly in quite some time. I see you here and there at shows, but it's usually just a high and by situation. So I'm very thankful for your time today to sit down and talk to you.
No dramas. Happy to finally be on the show.
And I've obviously, my wife Nova is here as well, my lovely co-host.
How you going, Luke?
I'm not too bad. How are you?
That's good, thanks, mate.
But yeah, fantastic. As we record this, we're here to kind of... Well, there's a couple of things we need to plug. Obviously, the main thing is the big upcoming Rage in the Cage show, but we'll cover that. And then there's a few little things you wanted to plug in between. But I always ask, and it's kind of a generic question, but it's a great icebreaker for people listening to the show. For first-time guests on the show, we always ask the same question, Luke, and that is, what is your earliest wrestling memory?
Earliest wrestling memory, probably seeing like some kind of weird highlight clip of like maybe Hogan and Warrior going at it at WrestleMania 6. I wasn't a fan at that point, but that was my first thing where I clicked. I was like, okay, this is this pro wrestling thing. And then a couple of years later, I saw a Flair and Sting match from like one of the early Nitros, and that's when I became a fan.
Flair and Sting, I don't think ever had a bad match, so that's a pretty good thing to start on, honestly. Even that last Nitro where they were both, out of breath, they still managed to put on a pretty great technical classic. So that's a pretty good one to land on. That's usually a lot of the time with like because we're very much around the same kind of generation, Luke, but usually people are like, oh, the Attitude Era this and the Attitude Era that. So in a way, as much as I love the Attitude Era, that's a cool one. Nice, refreshing one to hear. But at what point from becoming a fan of wrestling did you discover Australian professional wrestling?
I went to the very first Clash in the Capital show. I don't know if you've seen this show or heard about this show, John. It was at the, if I remember correctly, the Canberra Workers Club, which is no longer there anymore. It was incredible. It was the year 2000 and had no idea that there was Australian professional wrestling. I thought there was such a jump from, pro wrestling being this thing that was on WCW and WWF at the time to, oh my God, there's this black and white flyer at the takeaway shop that says pro wrestling on it. And, there's a time and date. And, if I go there at this time and date, I, can expect pro wrestling. And, I went. And you couldn't have told me that wasn't the best pro wrestling show that I'd ever seen just because it was the first one I saw live.
Hell yeah. And it's kind of crazy because honestly around that time, that's where it was really thriving in Canberra before it kind of died off. And I don't think if you had have said like, what are we, 2024 now? So if you had said 24 years ago that, oh, this will be gone in a few years, but don't worry, it'll all be back a few years later. It would have been a mad roller coaster. John Novalee, if you were in the pro wrestling business in the year 2000 and you weren't making money hand over fist, you're an idiot. How could you? It was like everyone was making money in the year 2000 from pro wrestling.
Yeah, for sure. So my first question for you, Luke, is what was the deciding factor that got you into the business, and when did you decide that you wanted to do it?
1998 at some point. I'd started to, do the fan thing, start to get all the action figures or the VHS tapes I could, and I made that decision in 1998 when I was 10, and so I signed up for martial arts and gymnastics because I knew that would create a good base for when I was old enough to move to wherever I needed to move to pursue this. Again, didn't know it was in Australia. As soon as I turned 16, after already competing at the national level for Canberra in gymnastics, training at the AIS of all places, I joined up with the Capital Pro Wrestling promotion, and was very quickly and hastily thrown into matches I was not ready for.
Pretty cool, like, full circle moment that you're getting to. Like,
I was just thinking that when he said AIS, now he's in the big arena. That's crazy.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. Well, look, at this stage, I've received some pretty bad news. This is going to be an amazing full circle moment with or without the hope from the top rope at the AIS. Doing this for 20 years definitely has its consequences, and what started off as some fairly, not too concerning back pain has degenerated into 3 slip discs, 2 degenerated discs, and a spinal infection. No doctors have cleared me to continue in the main event on the 2nd of November, but regardless of the Hope's involvement or not, this will be a full circle moment for sure.
We actually have a question about that later on in the chat, so we'll circle back to that. But Nova, talking about training in full circle, I think this is a good time for you to jump into segue into your next question.
Yeah, so this next one, the next few questions, where they're going to hop around a little bit, the conversation's going to go a little bit back and forth, but we can...
By all means.
So if we can fast forward, Luke, something you actually brought up to us was you wanted to mention, so let's jump straight into it, what made you want to start a training school?
Yeah, so ever since I became involved in anything other than being a pro wrestler, I realised when I'd started in 2004, had my first match in November 2004, thrown in the deep end, and I always felt that something was off, something was wrong. Yes, I was, had a big crowd for my debut, which was nice, but felt like there was something I didn't know or something that my trainers didn't know, and injuries were frequent, concussions were frequent, not for me, but for the people around me. And I was like, okay, this is not okay. I would go out and I would wrestle in Sydney, Newcastle, Melbourne, and people were getting dropped on their heads. People were getting hurt. People were getting hurt with things that you would think that if you were doing this as a full-time job, that you wouldn't be making these mistakes. And I knew that something was off about my training. So I saved up my dollars and cents. I went and trained with Lance Storm in 2008. Lived there. The next year, I saved up my dollars and cents. I got accepted to live at the Dragon Gate Wrestling Dojo in Kobe, in Japan. And I came back from that with a mission to make sure that wrestlers who came and trained under me were trained properly, safely, correct footwork, correct pacing, and the way to do this on a regular basis without having concussions, things like that. The pro wrestling training I have provided has gone through many evolutions since then. But just recently, the Slam Pro Wrestling Academy has opened, become the first full-time pro wrestling school that Canberra has seen. We have 5 nights a week training with some of the best coaches in the country. And yes, it's absolutely safety and fitness first. And yeah, we've just seen in the scene too many people come away with concussion this, concussion that. They almost wear these concussions like a badge of pride, and I think that's unacceptable. and it's quite disrespectful to the business. I think obviously when you're doing pro wrestling correctly over any length of time, yes, accidents will happen. Your body will be hurt. You will be there will be concussions, things like that. But if you're racking them up in every match, and then you're going to telling people that you are a pro wrestler, and look how many concussions I had, and you're throwing that up as a, like a sign of, pride, you're not doing the wrestling business any favors, because the available training and the available skills are out there for you to not get these concussions. So if you're out there not pursuing that and coming back and gloating about your concussions, then you're making an active choice to not be doing it properly and give wrestling a bad name. And that's how wrestling gets shut down in awesome venues that would, normally make a lot of money with pro wrestling companies instead of, be ashamed to have pro wrestling there.
I really dig that. You can, and again, like I've met you kind of in passing here or there through the time where I was refereeing and, semi getting into the business before health stopped all that for me anyway. And you've always, every time we've had a discussion, whether it's backstage or just in passing, you've always, explained the importance and the passion is, I think that's just the only word I can use, is just the passion is quite clearly there for you. And, as this business...
sorry to interrupt. Like again, we've had our interactions, and I wouldn't say we know each other too well, but like I'm sure you've seen it because you've been in the business for as long as you have, and I'm sure Nova Lee has seen it because she's been in the business, or at least adjacent to the business, as long as she's been. Like, you form bonds with these people that you trust your body with. You don't want to see them get hurt any more than they need to put on the caliber of event that is needed for the industry to thrive. And B, you don't want them hurting you unnecessarily, because at the end of the day, whether or not you wrestle once every week, once every month, or once a year, you don't want one slip up, one accident that could have been easily avoided to have knocked you out, or God forbid, living with your conscience because you skipped training here or there, or your footwork wasn't quite right, you put somebody on the sidelines. It's devastating. I've seen too much of it, and thankfully now, with the amount that the industry has grown in Australia, there are over 55 promotions, active promotions in the country. I don't know how many training schools there are, but the training is available to anyone out there. And I just want to put out here, because I think this is a bit of an industry podcast, from what I've listened to anyway. Anybody who has had any trepidations, second thoughts, or thought maybe they might not be welcome at the Slam Pro Wrestling League Academy, it's absolutely not true. You're hearing it from the boss himself. You have an open invitation. Come have a tryout. Reach out to the Slam page. Shoot us a message. We'll send you all the details. The skills are there. We're not hoarding them. By all means, please come. Check it out.
Well, this is an argument that I've had with many people myself, Luke, and it pisses me off, and I get it, right? I've been in the business, quote unquote, for 7 years now. Like, for whatever that's worth, it is what it is, right? So I'm not a grizzled veteran by any mean, but I think a lot of this is common sense, and it does grind my gears. And I've had arguments with people in this same vein where I'm like, hey, look, if you don't have aspirations to make it big or whatever, that's your prerogative. If you want to wrestle once a month or once every 2 months, that's fine. But I myself, like, if you come to this and you treat it as a hobby, that pisses me off, because I'm like, yeah, okay, wrestle once a month, but at the end of the day, it's still a business, it's still a profession. And if you're not going to give it the respect to train or put in the effort to market yourself or the company you're working for, or, that's a completely different realm stemming off that. But if you're not going to put in the effort, why even bother showing up to begin with? That's my thing.
I completely agree. And guess what? Part-time work is still work, and not doing your job, even if it's a part-time job, you still get fired. That's how the real world works. And it's just one of those things. And Sam, I've got all the respect in the world for the once-a-month wrestlers. I was a once-a-month wrestler, and if that's all your appetite is, then be the best once-a-month wrestler that you can be. You should go out and you show people that you look better each time, that you elevate people each time with your skills, and you are safe, and people are a pleasure to work with. And guess what? You might find yourself getting invited to do more and more stuff. And then even if you still just want to be a once-a-month wrestler, guess what? You get your pick of the litter, and you have more variety because people want to work with you, because you're getting a reputation in the business as somebody who is safe, reliable, and who helps make people who work with you look better each time. And I think a lot of people pay lip service to that attitude, but when it comes time to actually apply the skills, I'm not saying everyone has to be like me and go live in Japan for a while, or live in Canada for a while, or go and do this for 20 years. I'm not saying that. I'm saying find your own way to be the most professional version of yourself, and think about the business that you love, that you say you love, that you post on Facebook that you love, and think about what you can legitimately do for that. And when you have a show, when you have an event, you go into that show, you go into that event, you can look at yourself in the mirror and you can honestly say that I gave something to pro wrestling. Pro wrestling is a net positive because of my efforts today. It's not something I took from wrestling. It's something I gave to wrestling. And as airy-fairy as that might sound, I think if we all took that attitude, then we'd be a lot safer, we'd all be making a lot more money, and the scene would grow. And guess what? The fans would have a better time. They won't be embarrassed to ask their friend because they're a hardcore, but their friends aren't hardcore fans. So I think that's the real secret to expanding the scene in Australia.
Yeah, well, it's always the argument of it's a lot easier to get people in the door than it is to keep them, because if they go to a wrestling show it doesn't even have to be Australia, like if they go to a wrestling show anywhere and it's clear that people aren't A, trained, or B, really given a rat's ass about what they're doing, therefore disrespecting the business, they're going to be like, oh, well, this is trash, and they're probably not going to watch wrestling at all because they're just going to have that stink on them.
Yeah, exactly right. And I think there's a pipeline of, and it's an unspoken about thing, and I'm probably going to ruffle some feathers. I don't intend to, but I think there's a pipeline generally. It's not Australian wrestling; it's independent wrestling. It's all levels of independent wrestling across the world. There's the type of attitude that comes in. They see an event and they get a lot out of it because they're a hardcore. But there's a bit of condescension in their attitude. They're like, oh, wow, that's all these guys do? I could do that. And guess what? They come in, they do a couple of rolls, they take a bump. All of a sudden, one guy has to pull out of the show. This guy gets a tap on the shoulder, replaces him. Oh, guess what? I'm the wrestler now. And now no one has to teach me shit because I set up the ring. I did this, I did that. And they don't have that aspiration to contribute to, even this small thing. They're like almost came into the business condescending to who was there. It's like, oh, look at this skinny guy, look at this fat guy, or I could do a better role than that. And as soon as you get in, then, you can pay lip service to the respect, but maybe the respect isn't really there. And you get comfortable just being slightly above average in the very small pond you came in. And I think it's pretty gross. And I think for some people, they're just there on autopilot. They don't even know they're doing it. But I've started to call it out where I see it. So.
No, it seems to be getting less and less, which I don't think we'll ever eliminate it, which it's just a fact of life. But if we can minimize it as much as humanly possible, then that's the goal, right?
Well, so yeah, you're absolutely right, John. Very good point. Because what it is, you have you're going to have this at the entry level of any sport and any performance art. So you're going to have people that want to be actors and they just want to say that on their Instagram profile, like, actor, DM me for whatever, but they won't take the time to do an audition tape, all this stuff, which is fine. That's to be expected. So we can't get angry for that existing. The responsibility really comes on the seniority of the promoters. I think the promoters and trainers to say, what do I want on my events? Because obviously you need to have your wrestlers, right? But then it's a case of, what example do I want to set for the wrestlers that I book already and the fans? And I can say a million times, I have a very high standard of the wrestlers I book and I take care of them and I do this and all my wrestlers are properly trained and X, Y, Z. But if my behavior contradicts that time and time again, you know what happens? I'm sure this happens at some promotions you've worked at, John, where, the ring set up, maybe doors are about to open and you have the pre-show meeting, right? Maybe the promoter, he starts gas bagging a little bit just because he's got a captive audience. And if their behavior hasn't matched their words, what do you get? You get the eye rolls. You get your little click, your little elbow nudge to the other guy. Yeah, this guy's full of shit. And it's true. It's unfortunate because it's true. And it's like everyone I've said that to, John, laughs in independent wrestling that I know because it's such an archetype. So really, it's not, it's not the person who's coming in with a bad attitude's fault that he's being let in. Like, water's got to go where you let it go. It's the promoters and the trainers' jobs to, inform it up and, maybe the next best wrestler, you need to pay him an extra $200 to come instead of getting this rookie who's been here for 3 months to jump on. Maybe that's the cost of keeping the standard high. And are you willing to pay the cost? Well, that's subjective. It's up to each promoter. Each promoter can run any event the way they want. But can they look at themselves in the mirror and say that when they made that decision, did they take or give to pro wrestling? And I think a lot of promoters would be ashamed of themselves if they had that honest look at themselves.
So, and I can attest to that because, again, I think I've only did 2 or 3, but I refereed a couple of your matches here and there. And you always came in and like you did carry yourself in a more professional manner. And I think, look, I'm not going to name names. I'm not going to shoot. That's not what this podcast is. But I think some people were taken aback by that, whether it's because they were threatened, I don't know. But you did carry yourself in a way of, you know, you were here because it was the business and the love of the business. But you were always still very, you know, nice and relaxed and friendly and up for a conversation with me. But I think that brings to your point, more people need to just step up and be like, no, this is a business. We need to treat it as such. And I have no doubt, like, I don't want to go on too much of a rant before we get into the next question and like plug the stuff that we're here to plug for yourself. But I have no doubt that you mentioned, you know, building the reputation and getting booked and stuff. With the way that you've carried yourself over the last almost 20 years and evolved and stuff, I have no doubt you could probably message just about any promoter in Australia right now and be like, hey, I'm free this weekend. And they'd probably try and make a spot for you, like, honestly.
Yeah. Well, that's very flattering to say. Thank you. But it's a case of, I think a lot of people, we fall into bad habits. I don't think anyone has the intention of being a complacent member of the pro wrestling industry. I don't think anyone goes out to be that, but I think we just get caught up in sort of these jealousies, these weird rookie rivals. Have you seen these rookie rivalries that happen, Sean? Like, I'm sure you have, because I think you speak to like some people, they'll get so petty about somebody, you know, subjectively being like pushed ahead of them or something like that, and it's and it's like talk about majoring in minor things, like everyone's going to walk into. So I walked into the Capital Pro Wrestling promotion, 58 kilos dropping, you know, light as a feather,
brick in each pocket.
Exactly right. And so I walk in, and the coaches there at the time, they're kind of giving me a hard time about it. I don't know how much you know about the 2004 era Capital Pro Wrestling League, Capital Pro Wrestling roster, but it was big, burly guys, heavy metal shirts, and that was like the stack where everyone's a scoop slammer. As soon as they got a whiff that I just came from a gymnastics and martial arts background,
okay,
or can you do a flip? I show them a flip, immediately book this guy. We have a skinny guy that could do a flip, and it was almost like before I had any proper fundamentals, I just learned how to lock. No, now go out there and do the thing off the top rope with the flip. And I got the pops, and that fed my little 16-year-old, you know, reptilian brain that wants attention and approval. So the coaches are saying I'm doing good, the crowd's saying I'm doing good. But I know in my heart of hearts this is wrong. I've read enough wrestling books and watched enough about wrestling to know that this isn't the way. And it's maybe not everybody has that self-awareness, but I think it's our jobs as sort of the elder statesmen now to sort of let people know where it's missing, and you never stop learning. I never stop learning. I'm still paying to go to seminars any chance I get, and I'm still going out of my way to learn a new trick or a new piece of wrestling philosophy. And I think the more we can sort of promote that, and just remember who we're serving when we come to an event or we come and, you know, put ourselves out there. Like we're trying to serve the sport of pro wrestling. And if we're good to the sport of pro wrestling, the sport of pro wrestling will reward us with short-term, you know, good crowd response. Medium-term, that crowd will come back and see us. And, you know, if we're good to pro wrestling will be good to us. It will pay us money. It'll pay us with opportunities. It will pay us with networking. And it will pay us with keeping our bodies safe. So I think if we treat pro wrestling just with a bit more dignity and higher standards than we have, which we're all guilty of slipping on sometimes, then I think like the potential for this continent for professional wrestling is unlimited.
I absolutely agree, and I'm really loving this wisdom that you're dropping on. And I'll quickly say this before I ask my next question, so that way Nova can actually ask some of hers, so I don't take over. But literally, as you were talking there about like, oh, you come in and they're like, oh, you can do a flip. This will probably pop you, because I'm sure you've seen like the Batman slapping Robin meme that's been around for like over a decade plus now, right? There was literally a thing where it was a take on modern wrestlers, and I think it was like 2018 or 2019 this come out, and we're 2024 now, but there's a thing where it's Robin going, but I can do a shooting star press, and Batman going, slapping him and saying, who cares, do your rolls, or something like that, which obviously as you, who that's actually your one of your finishes, the shooting star press, I just felt like I had to share that, because I felt like that'd pop you, because it literally proves your point where there's people coming in there where they're trying to take advantage of that, where they're like, oh, but I can do this corkscrew, or I can do this and I can do that, which is great. It's great to have a athletic base, but unless you have the basic footwork and can slap on a wrist lock, you know.
Or know the method to make that mean as much as it can mean. Like I got into a real bad habit when I started. I thought, okay, people are liking one moonsault, so I should do 4 in a match. And you get the diminishing returns for each one. And you know what I'm doing? I'm not only ruining my own match, guess what? I'm ruining the card. I didn't know I was ruining the card, but you put, let's put the little high flyer out in the opener. Okay, openers had 4 moonsaults now. What are the other 10 wrestlers going out there? All sort of the bigger burly guys that are more likely just to sort of side slams and body slams. Well, talk about the illusion of a deflation. Like, that's tragic. And I should have never been in this position to ruin the cards like that, but I was. And I have to take responsibility for it, even though I didn't know. I take responsibility for it now. But yeah, like, with the gathered wisdom that we can all get, we need to serve the promotion in service of the card, in service of our match, in that order. It's got to be the promotion first, the individual card next, and very last, it's our match. How does our match serve the card, and how does the card serve the promotion? That's the correct weighting of the priorities, at least, my subjective analysis.
Well, it was probably about a year ago now, with how quick time's going, but I had an argument with a rookie, which is weird to say, because I guess on a technicality they've had as much ring time as I did, because I've been out of the ring for 4 years now. But they're in the pre-show match, and it was just like, we want to do this, and this. And I've just kind of looked at him and I'm like, why? It's like, it's the first match they're seeing. And it's like, well, okay, if the main card, the opener does need to be hot, but you're the pre-show, like, it's not going to be on the DVD, it's not going to be this or that. Like, it's going to go on YouTube, that's awesome. But it's like, we want to do this, and this. And I literally just threw my hands up, and I was just like, okay. I'm just going to let you make this mistake, because I'm not in a position, like, as I said, I'm not a grizzled vet, so I'm not going to stand here and just argue, because there's no point. But it's just like, let you make the mistake, and then you can look at it in hindsight and be like, wow, that was a dick move.
Yeah, but like, it's a case of I think that's happening in locker rooms and venues all across Australia every weekend, John. And but realistically, how many promotions have you gone to where that is explicitly mitigated for? Where it's like, okay, you need to speak to an agent, or you need to run the match for to somebody to make sure that there aren't that there's a good flow to the event, or is it 5 to 10, do whatever, and then it's dog shit after that, because it's because I've had over 2,000 matches. I've travelled up and down the east coast of this country more times than I care to admit, and I've been able to see how many promotions do things, and how sometimes be able to sneak out into the crowd. And someone who loves pro wrestling as much as I do, if you can make me bored and hate pro wrestling and just can't wait for the card to be over, like, what have I done with my life? This is the thing I love so much. What is it about some of these cards that make me want, the pro wrestling to end and go home? And, you start to develop, okay, what is it? It's this flow, it's this thing. Like, how are you turning pro wrestling against me? It's the booking, it's the execution, and it's the aesthetics. It's those three.
And this is something that I'm glad you brought up. Like, I don't want this to turn into a cheap plug, but obviously you came to our first show for Extreme Capital Wrestling, and obviously we've only had 2 shows, so we're still trying to build, still trying to live and learn kind of thing. But I've been giving that job where, not so much agent, because I don't want to sit here and tell people what to do, but I was told by the promoter, who obviously publicly doesn't want to be known. I think you know who it is anyway, Luke. But basically, you go through, and I helped them put the matches kind of in order. Once they did all the booking of talents and who was facing each other, and then I just helped them move from one down to whatever, right? But it's like, look, just go through and tell everyone. Don't tell them what to do, but just tell them what not to do, right? And, same thing. Like, this is your time frame. This is the story we want ish. But basically, you have creative freedom as long as you don't do A, B, and C, right? And luckily, for the most part, it came out pretty freaking good, which I was happy with. And I do agree with you, and I'm glad that you have a school like that. And like even 3 Count up in Queensland are really making a name for themselves. But as you said, everywhere in the country now, every state, even Northern Territory which is really out of the way, have is it Top End? And like they've got some great rookies coming through from what I've heard, and it's just no one has an excuse at this point.
I went to Top End to do a seminar a couple of months ago, and I was thoroughly impressed. The fact that Tasmania, Northern Territory, how many promotions are in Adelaide right now is absolutely amazing. So it's never been a better time to learn from everybody. And just on that, I don't know how we're going for time, but I think you made a really good point, John. And I just want to emphasize it is the boss's job, the promoter's job, to give the talent the constraints in which they should work with, because he or she is the person providing the platform and, forking out the money for the event to happen. So really it's the promoter's vision. And you can think all you want about a particular promoter as a person, but if you respect the position of promoter, you separate the position of promoter from, Gary, who you don't get on with. But no, Gary has his promoter hat on and you've agreed to work with Gary. Like, it's not about being Gary's friend. It's about, okay, we're going to service pro wrestling through Gary's lens, the promoter's lens, and respect the position of promoter. And I think, again, just being able to and that especially goes with if you are wrestling somebody that you don't like on a personal level. Maybe they've been talking smack about you online, maybe to your face, maybe there's a genuine hatred there. But if you respect their position as opponent in pro wrestling, and you do that, and you make sure that they are so safe, and they're going to do the same for you, then all that personal stuff doesn't matter. So do what the promoter says, not because it's Gary the promoter. No, it's because it's the person with the title of promoter. And no matter what somebody has done to you, you respect that somebody's giving your body in a pro wrestling ring. You respect their position as your pro wrestling opponent, and just leave all that personal stuff at the door.
Absolutely, because like I in my my real life before my injury and everything, I was literally working as a janitor, right? Absolutely glorious job. But you know what? It paid for my wedding and it paid for a wedding ring, so I can't complain. There's plenty of people there that I didn't get along with or whatever, for whatever reason. Personalities just clash at times. But you work together, like whether you're in an office or a sport, it's common sense at this stage. But it seems like we have to keep. How many episodes now have we harped on that? We're like, just work together. It's not that hard.
Well, I think it's a case of like, okay, so promoter is going to put out, put up an event, and he'll contact people to work for them. Obviously, an agreement will be made between the performers and the promoter. If after that agreement is made, anybody in that line is starting to renege or modify that, then it's like, well, no, we agreed. This is what's happening. And obviously things change and things happen, but there are respectful ways to go about it. And again, like, you don't have to get on with them. No one's forcing you to be friends with this person outside of what we're doing for pro wrestling here in the pro wrestling industry. So I just always try to bring it to that. It's like, okay, like, it kind of puts things in perspective when, okay, I need to make the pro wrestling industry better tonight from this event. And if it means going out and working with someone I hate and making them look like $1 million because that's what I agreed to the promoter that I would do 3 weeks ago, then so be it. And then I can look at myself in the mirror and I said, look what I did for the pro wrestling industry today. I put aside this personal thing and I put on a hell of a match. And, like, how mature is that? Like, that's what we really need, I think.
Absolutely. I'll switch gears here before we just rant for like an hour and a half about stuff. But no, you're giving some awesome stuff, and like you said, we've crammed quite a lot in like a decent time frame, actually. But I'll switch gears here, Luke. You've been in the business, as you said, for 20 years this year, and you've had a lot of different monikers and nicknames and characters, and I'll let you decide how deep you want to go into that for kayfabe reasons or whatever. But what to you? What would be the biggest difference, if anything, between Lightning Luke Watts versus Hope from the Top Rope Luke Watts.
Hope from the Top Rope has his war stories. He's been up and down the roads. He's no longer broad-eyed and bushy-tailed, but he knows what's important, and he knows that without the fans, that he wouldn't be where he is. That he's been blessed to have such a long career in professional wrestling, and because of that, he wants to pay the fans back tenfold for that. So that is the mission statement from the Hope from the Top Rope. Lightning Luke, again, was, a teenager. He just came out of competing nationally in gymnastics, and he wanted to prove to the Southern Hemisphere that how good cruiserweight wrestling could be, how big athletic style wrestling could be, and he was stopping nothing to hone his skills and get better. That's why he moved to Japan. That's why he moved to Canada, to went and wrestled at Osaka Pro Wrestling. Many other monikers between that. I think they're all, a shade of, they all make up the Hope from the Top Rope, honestly. Lightning Luke went away, put in some size, became the Jaguar Kid. And again, refined style, again, get in the reps, try to get a bit more of a mean streak, more ferocity. And then I think, this is the final evolution, at least from what I can see, is the Hope from the Top Rope, which became apparent in 2020.
Excellent.
And my next question for you, Luke, just going back to about your injury that was just on social media, like recently announced. As we record this episode, there's been doubts if you'll be able to compete on November 2nd at Rage in the Cage 2 after Dan Archer's attack. So could you tell us what your mindset is like at the moment, and possibly even a hint at a replacement that you might have if necessary if you can't compete?
Yeah, I don't really like talking about that. The board of directors are they're talking about replacement. They're talking about not getting the doctor's reports that would satisfy their needs to let me defend the Slam Championship on the 2nd of November at the AIS, the place where I honed the acrobatic and explosive skills to become the best pro wrestler in the Slam Pro Wrestling League that you see today. Honestly, it's been pretty bad. Every doctor, every physio, every second opinion that I get, it's all coming back saying the same thing. They're saying that Luke Watts' time in the ring, maybe it's time to consider hanging it up. At the moment, I'm, don't know quite how to feel about that. One side of me looks at everything I have and everything that pro wrestling has given me and think, yep, this is it. It's time to think about quality of life moving forward. And the other side of me thinks, what do these people know? This physio hasn't been through what I've been through. This doctor hasn't. This MRI can't tell me what is in my spirit, what is in my heart, and what is in my blood. So at this stage, I'm talking with other specialists. I'm doing a lot of rumination and negotiation with the board of directors. So you'll have to possibly reach out to one of them to see what their intentions are. Okay. But all I can say is, with or without the Hope from the Top Rope, November 2nd is going to be an absolute incredible landmark event for pro wrestling in Canberra and in Australia. We're over 1,500 tickets sold now. So it's going to be a glorious night. And it's the thought of not being a part of it is pretty devastating. But I'm sorry if I had more to tell you, I'd tell you.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. My next question for you is, what is your favourite match of all time, both that you've had personally and that you've seen, whether that be live or on TV?
There's been a lot. What did he say? Over 2,000. So
yeah. There's a few to pick from.
God damn.
Sorry, this is a match that I've had or watched.
So you can do pretty much what the question is what is your favourite match of all time, both that you've personally had and that there's a double parter and that you've seen. So whether that be like you've seen it on TV or it's live, like a live match that you've been to.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm gonna cheat a little bit. I'm gonna go with a a tie here for matches that I've been a part of. First one would be National Convention Centre, December 16, 2023. My first ever steel cage match, beating Mikey Broderick to become the Slam champion. Absolute wild night. Record-setting crowd, the biggest Australian pro wrestling crowd in the 21st century. It was an absolute moment. I feel like it was a journey that the fans and I had been on for 3 years, and it culminated on that night. It's going to live in my memory very fondly. And the other match would be the very first match in Slam Pro Wrestling League history. It was myself versus Dan Archer, and I think it really set the tone and pace for what the Slam Pro Wrestling League would become all these years later. So, again, speeding a bit on that one. This next one changes quite frequently. I've kind of got an ethereal top 5 that's always popping in and out. That said, look, there is it's not the first Nitro, but it's one of the later 1996 ones. There's a Sting Flair match that's got a clean finish. It's sort of Sting. His hair's getting darker, like he's still surfacing, but he's kind of letting the blonde grow out, just the frosted tip sort of thing. And it was just this absolute adrenaline-filled, amazing match. Gorilla press, Flair flop, over the top. It was just basically the equivalent of listening to like the greatest hit CD of your favorite band who never had a stinker, right? So that was that always one I go back to in my mind where I'm like, this is pro wrestling. This is what it's about. It's about giving the fans what they want and expect, but just not letting them know how you're going to get there. But they're so happy when they see the greatest hits.
Hell yeah, that's definitely a good one. As I said at the start of the episode, Sting and Flair I don't think ever had a bad match, so that's definitely not a bad shout there.
Even their schmod stuff they did in TNA is like excellent. Like if you take the anti-TNA hate goggles off for that era and watch it, it's like they're selling their asses off and the crowd are going wild each time.
Oh, even Sting and Hogan to that same point. Like, was it a technical classic? No, but dude, that was the fans loved every single second of it.
Get out of town, yeah, absolutely. Like, and considering how much pain Hogan was in at the time, like, it's a true testament to. Like, he didn't need to do that. Like, he didn't need to do that at all. He was getting his money. It was he had something to prove, and so did Sting. And yeah, no, that was excellent. Was that Bound for Glory or Anniversary? I can't remember. It was one of the two.
Yeah, one of the two in like 2011 or 2012-ish. It was in that Hogan era. Yeah, Bischoff anyway. But lots of people, Luke, especially within Australia, when we ask them like about their dream matches and stuff, which Nova will cover in a second, they always say like they'd love to do a cage match. You just mentioned one with Mikey Broderick last December, which was an awesome match. I loved watching the feed, and I've since watched it back when it was uploaded again on YouTube just by itself. It is a great match. I really did enjoy it. But what is your mindset when you find out that you're actually gonna do a cage match, and just how do you prepare for said cage match, knowing that it is so grueling and so many other people would love to be in your shoes, and on top of that, in theory, again, you're still waiting for the doctors and whatnot, but in theory, you're about to do it again for a second year in a row. Like, how does that sit in your mind?
I tell you what, going into that first cage match and then coming out of it, it's nothing like you think it's going to be. It is way more constrictive and claustrophobic than you think. A lot of my arsenal was swapped out because, wow, I can't just jump through the ropes here to get to the top rope. I can't do this. I can't do that. And it becomes a real battle for attrition because you can only win the match in the middle of the ring or by escape. But the closer you get to that medal, then the more, you're just in danger territory. I've got cartilage that still hasn't softened from having my face and ears scraped against that cage. And I like to think that that isn't a weakness, that is a strength. And that I had every intention of stepping in with Dan Archer on the 2nd of November. I've definitely got the edge of the experience. I've made my peace with the cage. I'm not afraid of the cage. And I think, Dan Archer's a lot of things. I need to say he's one of the greatest athletes, one of the greatest prodigies that pro wrestling has had, not just here in Australia, but anywhere. But his character is not becoming of the Slam champion. And I don't care how many physical gifts you have. Just like people told me I had physical gifts going into the last one, is once you get into that 4 sides of steel, you crumble. The fear gets to you. The unknown gets to you. The hundreds of matches you've had in your career mean nothing now because there's this new factor of the 4 sides of steel. And yeah, again, like I said, you can't prepare for it. It feels way different, way more impactful, way more painful than you anticipate.
Very, very insightful. I appreciate that. I will say, though, as a side note, though, like, regardless of being able to prepare for it mentally or whatever, whether you love him or whether you hate him, the physical journey that Dan Archer has gone on, honestly, I give him props. Like, he has done a phenomenal job. He really has.
Look, there's a 100%. I've seen him again. We had the very first match of the Slam Pro Wrestling League together, and with that, he became the first loser in the Slam Pro Wrestling League, and I think that's eaten at him ever since that fateful night in December 2021. And he's been on a mission, and he wants to look forward and be like, no one is ever going to make me feel humiliated like that again. And guess what? All that motivation, all that hate, all that anger, that has a face, and that face is mine. It's the hope from the top rope, Luke Watts. And nothing would be more satisfying to Dan Archer than to dethrone me from the greatest prize in the game. So I know Dan's talking about replacement this, replacement that, but I know deep down in his blood that he will not be satisfied until he gets me. So until that happens, whether it's November 2nd, whenever it happens, I know that he's not going to be satisfied until he takes off the 2 top dog of the Slam Pro Wrestling League. And at this stage, that belt means it's me.
There you go, fighting words there from the champion.
Big fighting words. So following on from that previous question, Luke,
how I feel, it's how the fans feeling. It's definitely in the air everywhere I go now.
Yeah. So just following on from that question, given that you've already had some pretty big matches and opponents, you may not even know like an answer for this, but who is your ultimate dream opponent and what is your dream stipulation, Luke?
If you had asked me a year ago, the dream stipulation would have been the cage match.
Love it.
Box ticked.
I don't think I can't think of a dream stipulation that I haven't participated in. I've had some pretty crazy matches, Rumbles, Royal Rumble type matches. So I've kind of done. I'm not too big on the super gimmicky matches. They don't. Not that they're not exciting and thrilling, but I know I don't have a deep appetite for them. Possibly, I don't know. What are some good answers you've had on here from a previous guest? Maybe it'll help me.
Well, usually the go-to is we kind of get 3 common threads. The top one is cage. The second one is either ladder / TLC, and the third is actually just usually like a submission match because we've had a couple of grapplers on here, which is awesome. But yeah, I honestly, I wouldn't mind seeing. We had Andy Coyne on recently, and his answer was a 2 out of 3 falls match, if not an Iron Man match. I wouldn't mind seeing Luke Watts and Dan Archer go 30 minutes or possibly 60 if Dan continues this insane transformation that he's on. But
yeah, you know what? Something like that would be an absolute endurance test to have to train quite hard for it because that's a completely different game. The match doesn't end with the pinfall; it ends with the timer. So that's a completely different game. I think that's a challenge that once if I get better, that's something I could train for and participate in. That could be a good one. As far as dream opponents, I've had the privilege of coming up and wrestling with some of the absolute best in the nation and in Japan. I had the privilege of being trained by Lance Storm, Shingo Takagi, Shima, Dingo Cannon. So I think at this stage, one of the matches that's left to tick off is a singles match with myself and Dingo Cannon. I was lucky enough to be a part of a triple threat match with him a few months ago when he returned to Australia briefly. But I think, with the legacy of Canberra wrestling being what it is, I think that would be a true intergenerational bout for people to enjoy. So I think that would be the dream opponent for sure.
Definitely a good one. Dingo Cannon has come up on this podcast so many times from so many different people, and it's awesome to see that he's he's still very relevant and still thriving, and obviously he's got some health issues of his own currently. So shout out to him and wish him all the best. But
not just shout out, his fingerprints are on everything Canberra Pro Wrestling. There is no ring in Canberra without Dingo Cannon. There is no original promotion in Canberra. And while, there was a Xerox of a Xerox of a Xerox of a Xerox as far as promoters and trainers went before him, he was and still is the absolute real deal, hasn't missed a beat. And, I think anybody who has performed, had the grace to participate in pro wrestling in Canberra or the surrounding territories, whether you've met him or not, you owe that man a debt of gratitude. So, I'll just say it publicly, thank you, Dingo, for starting pro wrestling in Canberra, because who knows where we would have all ended up.
There we go. That was for Dingo Cannon. But no, definitely a mainstay, I guess, would be the word to use of not even just Canberra wrestling, but Australian wrestling, but specifically Canberra wrestling, definitely. And obviously the stuff he did.
And the first full-time contracted Australian wrestler in Japan. Like, people forget about that. Osaka Pro Wrestling, Okinawa Pro Wrestling, now Ryukyu Dragon, which is official sister promotion of Dragon Gate. Like, he is living it full time, and it's way more intense than any of us could imagine.
Absolutely. As we start to wind down, before we go into full blown like promoter mode and start plugging stuff, we always like to kind of end like the official with air quotes on an audio only podcast, but we end the official interviews with a non-wrestling question, just kind of as like a fun fact, and we always try our best to tailor it to our individual. So with you, I know you're in a bit of pain right now, and they say that laughter is the best medicine. So I know you're into a bit of comedy, Luke. So with that being said, who is your favorite comedian, and what is your favorite comedy special?
Favorite comedian is Jimmy Carr, and the can't remember the name, but the fifth one. I think it was 2009, the 2009 Jimmy Carr special.
I think it's called Laughing. Watch that.
Yeah.
I think it's called Laughing and Joking. I think.
I just went on a massive Jimmy Carr binge on it's probably actually close to a year ago now, because again, time flies when you're having fun. But Netflix had like all of his specials on there, and I just binged them all.
Yeah, it was Jimmy Carr pre-hair plugs. It was for sure.
And then I just wanted to piggyback off that question before we get into the plugs. What is your favorite comedy spot in wrestling, Luke?
Comedy spot. So interesting. So I've got personal, subjective, strong feelings on when comedy is appropriate and what it is in pro wrestling. My favorite comedy spots, I suppose, would be ones that don't insult the fans' intelligence or don't bury the referee. So I think anything where you can do a nice misdirect that is very logical. I think anytime there's a misdirection with like a dizzy spot is always good, because it doesn't bury the promotion, bury the card, or bury the match, because everybody knows what it's like to be legitimately dizzy, and you could make a mistake like that. So something like that.
Nice.
Short and to the point. I love it. Well, that being said, Luke, coming up, obviously, November 2nd, you said your health may be in jeopardy, but could you just tell us a little bit about Rage in the Cage 2 and what to expect? And then following on from that, just where can we find Slam on social media and yourself on social media and merch and, just all the bells and whistles. Give you like, a few minutes to just kind of plug yourself and Slam and anything and everything that you want.
Absolutely. November 2nd is going to be a landmark night for Australian pro wrestling. The AIS Arena, 1,500 tickets already sold. Last tickets still available at slamprotix.com.au. To put this in context, when WWE was here, they got 950 people with their NXT brand at the same arena. So that we're beating WWE in our own backyard is fantastic news. Be a part of history. There's going to be an amazing cage match. There's going to be incredible undercard matchups. The vacant Slam Championships are on the line between the Untouchables and the Dropouts. We've got Bronson United with Josh and Vinnie Bronson taking on Hugh Beauty. We've got Kingsley, the first and still reigning women's champion, against Rita Stone and many other matches. It's going to be an absolute night to remember. Slamprotix.com.au. If you're in the industry and if you're within an hour drive of Canberra, we have the Slam Pro Wrestling League Academy training 5 nights a week with some of the best trainers in Australia. I'm one of the head coaches. Again, I've trained under Lance Storm, Shingo Takagi, Steamer, Dingo Cannon. I've wrestled for Dragon Gate, Osaka Pro Wrestling. I've trained UFC stars, Elvis Kisadok. I've trained Terry Campese for his upcoming appearance in the Terry Campese Battle Royal, which will also be at the AIS Arena November 2nd. Please just, come check it out. If you want to become a better pro wrestler, you want to give more to pro wrestling, please let us know. We're, very approachable, very professional, and we just expect you to be the same with us. Hope from the Top Rope on Facebook and Instagram is where you can message me for any booking details or requests. Pretty easy to find. But any other questions to the Slam Pro Wrestling League, they're very easy to find on social media as well.
I will say, though, you kind of just glossed over the Terry Campese Battle Royal. You've got some serious firepower in this matchup this year. Like last year's was fairly stacked, and obviously eventual winner Ricky South, but I think this year may have actually outdone it with the amount of star power legitimately in Aussie wrestling that is in this Battle Royal. It is huge.
Without question, some of these gentlemen I've not had the pleasure of sharing the locker room with yet. I'm very excited to meet them. I've heard all about their victories up and down the east and west coast of Australia. So I think there's still more to be announced, which is insane. But it's definitely going to be a star-studded affair. And you know what? Going back to one of the questions you asked before, I think maybe my dream stipulation would be taking on and taking part in the next year's Terry Campese Battle Royal.
Excellent. We actually have, what do we got? Four tickets to the show. I'm very, very excited. We had to sit right at the back just because of health reasons and whatnot, but I'm excited to finally attend a show because I haven't attended a show in Canberra since the Wrestle Clash show in 2018 or 2019, whenever that was. So I'm very excited to finally attend a Slam show.
Yeah, no, I like the good thing about the AIS Arena and any venue Slam runs. All seats are good seats, and everyone's going to have an amazing view of the whole event.
My mum and my brother, they've attended. I think they've done everyone this year so far. I think, but probably about 80, if not 90% of Slam shows all up, and they've always had a lot of fun. My brother's always messaging me and sending me photos and videos and making me very, very jealous. But I'm so excited that of all the shows that I can attend, it's this massive show at AIS, and I give you kudos because every time it's come up with either Nova or someone outside of the podcast, I've said the same thing, that the moment you announce the show, and Nova can verify this, the moment you announce that show, I said you guys are going to outdraw NXT, and you've literally almost doubled it. So obviously it's it's the 13th of October as we're recording this. This is going to drop next week, just so we've got just on 2 weeks of promotion. Hopefully this podcast helps sells more tickets, because that was the goal anyway. But I have no doubt that we're going to, by the time November 2nd comes around, I think we're going to be close to doubling that number that NXT had, honestly. And it's, as you said, it's not just good for Canberra, it's just good for wrestling in general. And I'm just very excited. I'm crack record here, Luke, but I'm just very appreciative of your time. I'm very excited for this show. We had Tommy Knight on a couple of weeks ago to talk about his upcoming match, and Mikey Broderick sent in some smack talk, so that was interesting. Thank you, Mikey. But no, I appreciate your
No,
time
no.
here today, Luke. And
Yeah, no, I appreciate having me on, and I think once you both have your first slam experience, I think you'll get the bug, and I think you'll be at many more in 2025.
yeah, so hopefully as the health continues to slowly but surely improve, we can try and make more shows every couple of months.
You and me, you and me both, man.
Thank you very much, Luke. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Likewise, thanks for having me, guys.
Bye, Luke.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that was Hope from the Top Rope, Slam Pro Wrestling League champion, Luke, I almost said Lightning Luke. Luke Watts, formerly Lightning Luke, which we did discuss in this conversation, the differences and the evolution and yada, yada, yada. I'm going to try my best not to rant, because I ranted for 10 minutes in the intro, and I am so sorry, but we're very excited, Nova. We're very excited.
Yeah.
This conversation with Luke we had to reschedule it. It was meant to be a week or so ago. And, we pushed it back a week, but it is what it is. Life happens. It is what it is, man. Yeah. And from literally, usually we do a little bit of small talk beforehand. And I think we only talked to Luke for like a minute before we jumped straight into this. He came on time, ready to go, very professional, as we talked about in the conversation as well. And yeah, just crack record here.
Sorry.
Thank you, Luke. And yeah, no, I definitely would love to at some point get Luke on. And perhaps this is where we're going to need the listeners to send in their questions because, hey, what exactly, talk about this specific match or this specific time frame or this specific tour or whatever.
Yeah.
'Cause honestly, I feel like Luke has stories for days. He really does.
Done
really
over
does.
2,000 matches.
Yeah,
so
that's
pretty solid career.
I wrestled 46 matches, and wrestle is a very, very fucking loose term. So, I mean, when Coyote said he'd done over 500, I was like, wow, but dude, 2,000 plus matches, kudos to you, good sir. But Nova, would you like to quickly repeat the song and match of the week, and then we'll explain why, and then we'll just jump to the plugs, and we'll wrap this up, because we don't want to rant for too long. I'm sorry, guys. I just love wrestling.
So your song of the week for episode 131 was Another Level by Oh the Larceny. And the match of the week was Sting versus Ric Flair, Clash of the Champions, 1988.
And again, Nova picked that song because Slam, at this point,
is on the trajectory to another level.
And they're only going up. And I tell you what, for a first time attending a show, Nova, and this is only going to be the third wrestling show that we're attending together as fans.
Yeah.
So it's going to be freaking nuts. As I said to Luke, obviously I did the Wrestle Clash show in either 2018 or 2019. I think it was 2018. He did say the date when I said it to him, and I've forgotten already because ADHD, but that was a banger of a show. But I'm yet to be to an actual proper Slam show, so I'm
actually
so excited. Yeah. And this is obviously, you've never seen a cage match in person. This is only going to be the second cage match I've ever seen in person, so very, very, very excited. With that being said, I think I'll get into the links. Obviously, my Linktree, Nova's Linktree, both contain the podcast social media pages. Nova obviously has her own personal ones. Mine has my own personal one. I also have the Crossfire Facebook page, the Crossfire graphics page. Check that out for some cheap graphics. What did I say on my Fiverr? Quality. Come get caught in the Crossfire of quality work at a quality price. Cheap plug in there, but yeah, all the pods are there. So Spotify, YouTube, Apple Pod, Podbean, all the individual profiles to those are there. If you, depending on what you're listening to or what you're listening on, you can click on that, and then all of the episodes will pop up from that as well. The Amazon wish list. I'm going to say it again just to pop Nova. Go buy that Raphael Ninja Turtle pizza slicer for her, please. She's been begging me for it, but I just if the shipping on that wasn't so expensive, I probably would have got it already. But just that extra $15 changes the trajectory a lot when Amazon don't do afterpay and stuff, and you've got medical bills and whatever. Speaking of medical bills, the GoFundMe is there. I'm not gonna beg, but it's there. Medical trips every 3 months, doing my fucking head in. And obviously we're here to promote the shows. November 2nd, we're talking about in this conversation, Slam Pro League, Rage in the Cage 2. Ticket below. Let's buy it. Even if we get one more ticket sold just from this conversation with Luke, That's going to be me done. That's going to make me a happy chappy. Very excited. Obviously, before that, we do have the Emma Butler Memorial Show on October 6th, but it's sold out. So just a reminder, for those that do listen to the show and are attending, please bring your cashola, buy some John Crossfire merch. Let's raise some money for Emma, as we said. Radiation Kick shirts, $30, $10 from every shirt, $250.
It's $25.
Yes. What?
You said $30.
No, 25 shirts.
Oh, 25 shirts at
$30.
Yes. Okay, sorry, my bad.
$10 a shirt, $250. And then,
my bad.
And then 10% of my general merch as well. But that's sold out. So for now, let's push this Slam event over. Let's push it to over 1,800 so they can double the NXT event, because I want to see them do it. So many people want to see him do it. I know Luke. Luke would love to see him do it.
Yes.
And again, all homegrown talent. It's huge. And obviously at the end of November, November 23rd, ECW Extreme Capital Wrestling, a Hard Day's Fight. I will be on my play-by-play duties. You will be back on your official ring announcing duties, possibly joining me on color commentary again like you did the last show. Who knows? And then November 30th, Botchamania. Wait. I'm just delirious now. I said I wasn't going to rant, and here I am. That was rude, Nova. Nova, press that one. That's touched my damn soundboard. November 30th, MXW All for One. The Rumble in Geelong. Winner of the Rumble gets a World Heavyweight title shot. Next time they're back in Geelong, and the main event, Bobby Fish, Richie Taylor, and they haven't announced it yet, but the night before, actually, on November 29th for Adrenaline, since he's already going to be in the country, Bobby Fish appearing / possibly wrestling on that show as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, got some great stuff coming up. But yeah, just this Slam show obviously is what we're getting home, trying to drive home the most for this particular episode. But yeah, Nova said the song and match of the week. I've said thank you way too many times. I've ranted too much about how much I love wrestling, but that's why I started this podcast. That's why it's been going for 3 years.
It's fitting though, because this is a very passionate episode about wrestling. So it all fits in.
And I think I'll just end this by saying, if you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to support the show in any way, you can get 2-day early access for as low as $5 a month, $3 US, or $5 dues, as Nova Lee keeps saying. It's the Rogue tier, the $10 tier, which is the essential, $15 tier, which is the real main event, and of course, Nova, the $20 tier.
The Supernova tier. Supernova baby.
That is linked in the link trees respectively as well, so you can go through and actually read up a bit on that. But yeah, for as low as $5 a month, y'all can support us if you've got the expendable income. And with that being said, I am the Essential John L. Crossfire.
And I am Nova Lee.
I lied one last time. Thank you, Luke. You guys have just been caught
in conversation. Shakalaka laka. Thank you, Luke.